Thank you very much. So, I'm thrilled to be here. The presentation today is called Site or App. I'm going to try to give you 10 useful, hopefully useful tips that will allow you to convert a website or a web application into a working application outside of the browser. So, I'm a senior program manager. I work for Microsoft Edge, specifically in the web apps team. I'm also involved in the W3C efforts around web applications. Basically, my day-to-day job is creating new HTML, new CSS, and new JavaScript to enable advanced capabilities for web applications in operating systems. So, having said that, we're going to go into a very simple question. What is it exactly a web application? If we think about certain definitions that are out there, web applications are applications that you build basically by using web technology. So all these technologies that I've been mentioning, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And they can be installed and they can run on all devices basically from one code base. So it's kind of this promise that we've always dreamed of having multiple platforms called native desktop, mobile or not mobile, to be able to run with exactly the same code. Another way of seeing it is that these are applications that have been designed to be capable, reliable, and installable. These three pillars transform them into an experience that feels like a platform-specific applications. And when we mention platform-specific applications, it's basically because if you're thinking about an application for, let's say, a business or for a project, you generally run into a multiple platform challenge, where if you want to do something for iOS, macOS, then you can do Objective-C, you can do Swift. If you want to do Android, you can do Java. If you are working on Windows, you can do .NET, etc., etc. But there is definitely an instant benefit that, depending on the application that you're building, you can use the web approach to make sure that you only have one code base that will run on each and every single of these platforms. Now, not everything is perfect, and I do have to say that there is support to some degree on multiple platforms and devices, but the best thing about this approach is that these applications rely on pretty much what we call on the web environment progressive enhancement. So there's always a reliable fallback that at worst case means that your app will be running. I've created applications that I've tried on smartwatches. The smartwatch does not support all the functionalities of the application that I was creating, but nonetheless, the fallbacks allowed it to be a functional application. So it's actually quite an interesting thing to think about, like the way that the web degrades gracefully. And then you might be thinking, web applications, are they actually a thing? And I'd like to get your attention on the current slide at the moment, because each and every single company or application that you see in this slide has, in a way, their main application be a web application, or they have a version of the web application. So if you think about Spotify, if you go to open.spotify.com, you actually are getting the PWA that you can install on multiple platforms. And same for any other application that you're seeing here. Now, if there's something that I want you to take from this presentation before I go into the tips, or basically the too long didn't read summary, is there is a website that's called PWA Builder, and this website, you can input any URL from your website, from your web application, and this will let you know what you need to complete in order to make your website into a full-blown web application. So if you need a web app manifest, you will be able to create it there. It'll create a template. If you need a service worker to handle offlining support, it'll be created there, and pretty much every single requirement. It'll even give you a score on what's the health, for example, of your web application. So with this introduction, I'd like to start with tip number 1, and this is a very important one because this is the one that enables all the web app experiences. Add a manifest file. This is a file that's common in multiple platforms, so the web now has a web app manifest file. It's basically a JSON file, and it provides information about the web application. So it's an essential part of the web application because it describes this web application and how it will be presented on the OS and on the platform. And as well as we're going to see throughout the presentation, it actually helps define many advanced features for the application itself. So if we create a manifest.json file and we put it on the root of our website, and we just create an empty JSON file. So that's the first step into making your website into a web application. And of course, in your HTML, your index.html, you would want to link this manifest to the code itself. So this line of code will get you the manifest in your HTML linked to the manifest file. Fairly easy. The second one is add an ID. And this is a very new concept that we're still trying to push developers to get in behind the idea of an ID. It basically looks something like this. We get the manifest file, we open it, and we are actually going to add an ID, and we're going to put any string that we want. Now, this does not have to be a URL that resolves to anything. We're just adding a unique identifier that will be able to tell. It'll basically avoid a lot of issues, like, for example, the user installing multiple times the same application. We don't want that. So we're trying to get developers to adopt ID. It's a great idea. Tip number 3, we want you to name your application. This seems fairly obvious as well. We have a manifest file. Remember, the manifest file is describing the application itself. So we have the ID. We can now populate it with a short name and a name. What's the difference? Well, depending on the platform, remember that these are applications that will be running on mobile, that can run on XR devices, that can run on laptops and desktops as well. So maybe if you're running this on an Android device, when you install it, depending on which launcher you're using, it'll choose to use the short name instead of the long name or the description. So like all these fields will vary depending on which platform you are using your application. So until now, it's been quite easy, quite simple. We're just adding the description of the application to the web app manifest. Number 4, this is where it starts getting a bit more colorful. Add icons. If you think about how an end user perceives an application versus how they perceive a website, it's because the application is something that they can have on their launcher. They go on their launcher, they click on an icon, and this icon brings a full screen if it's on mobile, or it brings an independent window if it's on macOS or Linux or Windows. But there's also the concept of like the icon that I can actually go and tap or double click to open this application. Turns out that the web can already do that and present itself as an independent app. Because in the end, most of the apps that we're already running on our operating systems are based on web technologies. They're just wrapped. This is the completely standards approach of doing exactly the same thing. So again, we have, I've highlighted the icons section, and we can see that the icon section is basically an array that receives a couple of objects, and these objects are objects that are of type image resource. So basically, this is a description of an image, and we're giving it the source, we're giving it the size, and we're giving it the type, in this case saying that it's a PNG, because we want to have that transparency for when the icon gets added to the launcher. Now, what is the whole point? Like, I can actually add a 64 from a 16 by 16 up to like a 512 to 512. Like, you can do a lot of icons here. The point is that depending, again, on the platform where this is going to be shown, the operating system, mobile, desktop, whichever you want to call it, it might use a different icon that might look better on smaller resolutions. So in this case, if we are displaying a big icon, you can have that one on your home screen. If you're getting something, let's say, on the taskbar, then you would be able to put something smaller that would look better and create a nice, consistent user experience. Okay. Tip number 5, we are going to make it appy. And again, I've just mentioned that part of the conception that a user has for an application is that it will run in its own window, or it will run full screen if it's a mobile application. What's the difference with the way that current applications or current websites are running on a web browser? That you have the browser's UX, right? You have the address bar, you have favorites, you have a lot of stuff that is useful, but that kind of draws away from the idea that you are an application. So, again, in the manifest file, since the manifest file started getting too populated, I've just put an ellipsis there to imagine everything that we've added before. But we're going to add two different new things. The first one is the start URL. If you go to any application on your mobile devices, it generally has a home page. It generally has a first screen that your user loads when you're going into this application. This is the concept of the start URL. In this case, and I'm keeping the example very, very simple. Think that you have a blank HTML document or with a title and some text, but I'm stripping away all the unnecessary things because I want you to see how you can get from an HTML file to a very simple web application. So start URL would be the index.html or whichever other start URL that you want. And we're defining here as well a display of standalone. And this is key because with all the other information that we've been added to the manifest file, this will allow the browser to identify and do a special behavior. By the way, the display, I haven't mentioned what it does. Display standalone basically is telling the user agent or the browser in general that we want this website, this web application to run in a standalone window or run in a standalone kind of like frame if we're talking about mobile. So if you've added all the things that I've just given you in these first 5 tips, then the browser, when you go into it, and this UX changes from Chrome to Edge to Samsung Internet, Safari is doing something similar, although they're not prompting. So but basically, once you have certain of these requirements, the browser, in this case this is Edge, will give you a little banner on the URL bar that says, hey, install this as an app. You might be browsing, and sometimes it happens to me that I'm going onto a website, a retailer that I generally use a lot, and it kind of prompts me like, hey, do you want to install this as an app? If you actually see it saying, hey, do you use this site often? You can install the app. We're not treating it as a website anymore. It's an app that can open in a focus window. That's the concept of the standalone. Has quick access options like pin to the taskbar or syncs across multiple devices. So remember, you add these things, and the browser will already prompt you to do an installation if available. Tip number 6. This would be theming your app. We're in modern times. The UX has changed a lot, where now your phone or your machine changes from light mode to dark mode depending on what time it is, etc., etc. But there's also a bunch of stuff that can be defined in the manifest that will help with the branding that you would give to your application. So again, I've put ellipses to kind of just ignore everything that we've seen before because it's a lot of text, and I kind of wanted to keep the focus on the ones that are highlighted. So we have background color and a theme color. You can see the colors there. I guess the important one here would be theme color. Again, depending on the user agent. User agent is just how we generally call the browser or the... let's think about the user agent as the browser. So depending on the browser, for example, Vivaldi takes this theme color, or the meta tag theme color as well, to color the tabs with this. So if you're navigating on your application's website, the browser kind of changes color, and it's very pleasant. If you install this as a native, as a standalone application on Windows, then the title bar will get its color from the value that you define here in the manifest file. So we can see how the manifest file is actually defining the whole appearance of your installed application. But there's more. depending on the theme that you have, in this case, running Windows, you can see that the applications will change depending on the theme. And your websites can also do that. And this functionality, because it's all based on web technology, also translates to your web applications. So if we were to add, you can see here two different additions of CSS files. Like if you see the top half, like the first line of each line before you get like the one that's in yellow, this is just normally how you would add a CSS file. But here we're adding a CSS file that's specific to light theme and a CSS file that's specific to dark theme. So on the fly, dynamically, when your platform changes the color, then your web application or website will also change and adapt. So let's say that if I wanted to invert things, I can have a dark theme CSS that basically takes and puts the background dark, and it sets the color to white. So if I go and I'm browsing and I change the color, the application will respond. And this is basically what we've all just come to expect from modern applications. So tip number 7, enhance the title bar. Depending on which platform you are, if you're on a desktop platform, Mac OS, Windows, Linux, you might have the opportunity, or you might have seen that native applications are kind of doing all these cool stuff where they put your profile icon on like the title bar, and they put like a search box, and they put like different controls. Generally, a title bar used to be just the icon, the name of the app, and the the window controls, which were on the corner, or the stoplights if you're talking about Mac OS. So we've worked on an API that basically frees all the viewport once the application is installed on a desktop, and it allows the web developer to take control and do whatever they want with that area. So supported on Windows, Mac, Chrome OS, and Linux, and it's enabled through the manifest file, as we've seen, and it can be, it works with JavaScript and CSS. So if I were to create a blank page with nothing, and I enable the feature in the web manifest file, which we're going to see right next, this is what my application, my installed application looks like. And you can see how we are removing all the title bar except the controls that are needed. And then you can create, if you wanted to create, let's say, a fake or custom title bar, you can just put a div there, color it the same way as the theme color that you defined in the manifest, and basically create the illusion that this is a different, advanced, modern application. Why is this important? I'm going to put here an example. So this is, on one side you have Spotify. This is running on Mac OS. This is, on one side you have the platform-specific Spotify app running on Mac OS. On the other side, you have the progressive web app that's installed from open.spotify.com. Differences, really hard to tell. But spoiler, if you see on the one to the left, you will see that it has a title bar that says Spotify, this, and the name of the song. So like if Spotify, for example, if you as a developer were to use window controls overlay, you can achieve a look like the one that you have on the right. Again, the manifest file comes in handy here, where we had this display standalone, and I explained the standalone is basically to set the window to a standalone mode. But you can also override. Certain browsers have functionalities that allow you to override and put a chain of fallback. So in this case, I'm telling it, I want you to override the display mode that I've put as standard and put it as a window controls overlay. And this will basically allow you to get this effect that we were seeing here. Okay, let's continue then. This is only to enable it in the manifest file, but then, of course, there is some JavaScript that we had to create in order to achieve this. Why? Well, because depending on the operating system, and I'm probably going to go to this slide, you can probably assume that the height of the title bar on Mac OS is different to the height of a title bar on Windows. You can also assume, and actually it's very clear here how on Windows, the controls are completely thrown depending on if you're using a computer left to right or right to left supported language. On Mac OS, you're going to have kind of like the space in the middle. So we've created new CSS environmental variables that allow you to give precisely these effects, these positions for the area to create a title bar. And basically, this is the code that you're seeing here. I want you to pay attention, probably the first 4 lines: width, height, top, and left. So I'm telling the platform, and again, because this is an application that can run on any platform, I'm telling the platform, okay, look for the width. Instead of giving it a percentage or a defined pixel size, I'm telling it, look for the environmental variable that's called title bar area width. And if it's macOS, it'll return one value. If it's Linux, it'll return another value. If it's Windows, it'll return another value. If you can't find this, and why wouldn't it find it? Because maybe the platform, the browser, does not support this. And this is where I was talking that the web degrades gracefully, and then it'll just default to 100%, and you're just creating the bar on top of the window. Same with height, same with top, same with left. And then the 2 lines in the bottom, the WebKit app region. And app region, this is to enable the behavior that we all expect from an application when it's running in the desktop. What happens when I take the mouse and I click and I drag from the title bar? The window generally moves. That's kind of like what we would expect. But the problem is that if we have this, everything that's white is web content. So technically, if I click, even if it's on the area that the title bar would have been, if I click and drag, it won't move. So we enable it through CSS. Running out of time. So, tip number 8, shortcuts. This is, again, a very cool feature, and it allows deep integration with the underlying platform. It allows a developer, it allows an application to deep link from an icon in either the taskbar, the start menu, the dock, the launcher. It's enabled in the manifest file, as you probably already suspected. Here we have 2 screenshots. The Android one, you can see, this is another demo application. The one that has kind of like the printer icon, this is what happens when I tap and press on Android. You can see that I'm getting create a blank logo and create a random logo. The screenshot that you have on the back is how it looks on Windows. And just so you can believe me that it actually works on multiple platforms, this is how it looks in Linux, and that's how it looks in the macOS dock. So same code, adapting to the different kind of style that the platform has. This is how you would do it. Again, this is in the manifest file. I add yet another entry that's called shortcuts, and I give it an array of objects. Name, so this is what the text would say. URL, this is where you would link, and this is interesting because like if you have a multiple page application, you can tell, well, when I right-click on the icon, I can go to a different page, not generally open the app always in the same start URL. And icons are supported depending on the platform. macOS does not support icons, Linux does not support icons, but Android and Windows do, so again, degrades gracefully. This is from a demo app that I was building this morning. This is actually how it looks on Windows when we add this to the manifest. You can see the shortcut 2, the awesome, it's for awesome, but it doesn't sound very good, but the awesome shortcut 1, awesome shortcut 2 with icon of a source of like, shortcut 2, shortcut 1. This is basically how it looks on the platform. So when I right-click on the icon that's on the taskbar on the start menu, I can open the app, my awesome app, or I get this thing that's called tasks, and I can just deep link to a different place in the application. For time's sake, I'm going to go through the next set of features, just so you can know that it is something that can be done with the web. Tip number 9, shared, because sharing is caring, and the web actually does allow you to share content from the installed application. It's supported on Windows, Mac, Android, and we created a JavaScript API that's the navigator.share that you can share text, you can share content. Again, adapts to the operating system. If you click share on Windows, you're going to get the native share sheet, which is this one that you're seeing here. If you click share on Mac, you're going to get the native share sheet on Mac, which looks like that. You can also share to your web application. So think that you created an Instagram competitor, you want to go into the operating system, click on an image and click share, and then share to your Instagram competitor. So you could do that with PWA. It's also enabled in the manifest file. In this case, this is sharing from the browser into the PWA. I'm taking just the page, and it's detecting the title of the page, and it's coloring the logo that's in there. It's a dark green, but you can't really appreciate it that much there. And finally, test it. And we've also built tools that help you build and test your web applications. DevTools, for everyone that does web development, is a great helper where if you go into DevTools, there is an application tab, and in the application tab, you can go into the manifest. And there in the manifest, you can probably not see because it's really small font, sorry. But you can see that everything that we've been defining in the manifest file is appearing there. You can see the icon there that we defined, the size of the icon. You have the start URL, you have the ID, it says computed app ID, you have the identity of the app. So all of this is the important thing that's making your application, your website, installable. And pro tip, I know there were 10, but it's a pro tip. This is store ready for some stores. You can submit your application to the Microsoft Store. You can submit your application easier to Google Play Store. No iOS support. I think at the moment, I think maybe PWA Builder might have done something there, but like again, this should put your application ready to go into the store. Shout out again to pwabuilder.com because it facilitates all of this that I've been telling you. It will put a UI where you can, okay, put your ID, put your theme colors, put the information that you need, fill in this form, and it will create the file that you will need. If you want to go beyond, and I didn't specify much on these capabilities, but like again, if any of you is interested, I'm happy to continue the conversation offline. There's a lot of stuff that we've been working throughout these years that a website or web app can do. If you want to have offline support, you have Service Worker. Protocol handling, you want to do a web app that handles calendar or mail to links or even a custom link, you can do that. File handling, you can define your own file type and make your web application the default for that file type. You can have access, of course, to the file system to save, to write. We can make that access persistent as well. View transitions to have nice animations where you're going from page to page. App title to further customize how the title bar text appears on certain platforms. And at the moment, the thing that we're working, web install, this is kind of cool and kind of big and kind of controversial as well, because we're allowing a website to install other websites. So if you wanted to build, let's say, a store or an app repo, you could build it yourself. This is still under development. It's going to be an origin trial next year. But it's interesting because let's say that you won't have to rely on the Microsoft Store, the Play Store, the Apple Store. You could build your own way of distributing apps. And I'm particularly very excited about this one. We're also working on scope extensions. Depending on the size of your application, it might be an application that spans across multiple top-level domains. Think about Amazon, Amazon.com, Amazon.co.uk, Amazon.ca, Amazon. et cetera, So we're working on something that you would actually add to the manifest, and you would specify, hey, all of these are I'm extending the scope of my application. So that's what scope extensions is. This one's close to shipping. Tab mode for PWAs. I don't know if it happens to you, like generally when I'm in Airbnb, I kind of right-click, open, and then I have like a bunch of tabs, and I go through every single one of these tabs. We're working the same way that Window Controls Overlay, which was the one that allowed you to customize the title bar, creates this different app mode. We're working on something that will allow your applications to have tabs. So if you wanted to build a messenger app or an instant client or something like that, it's going to be built into the platform. And this is already supported in Chrome OS. There's some bugs that we're fixing on Windows and Linux and Mac, but it's going to be there. So I have 28 seconds. The takeaways. If you want to try or you want to be on the bleeding edge, pun intended, of what's happening in the web platform, you can go in the Microsoft Edge Insider channels. Chrome has a similar thing, Firefox has a similar thing, Safari has a similar thing where you're downloading code that might not be stable, but you can try all these applications if you were aiming to support something like this. And yeah, give us feedback. We have basically the manifest file that is key to supporting a lot of these features, but we're always listening. We're always interested in your opinions as developers. Is there something that we should be doing differently? Is the API to your liking? Should we be building it differently? At the end, we're building all this technology for you and to have a different option for web development. So yeah, anything that you want to tell us, we are all ears. Thank you very much.